Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage and welcome back to another Darling in the Franxx episode review. Today we are going to be talking about episode 8, Boys X Girls. And with this episode, again like last week, I feel like there will be mixed reception because it is another slice of life-esque episode, establishing our main characters and their relationships, fleshing those dynamics out more, and a little bit of world building, mystery building on the side. It was a good episode, I really enjoyed it. I just feel like other people won't, but then again, that's what I said about last week's episode, and a ton of you said that that was one of your favorites, if not your favorite episode of the series so far. So it could be that people actually do enjoy these character building episodes and this will be another one of your favorites, who knows? All I know is that I'm here to talk about it. There was a decent amount to analyze, although not as much as previous episodes, so I feel like this might be the shortest episode review yet. Not that that's saying much because there's still a lot to talk about in this episode. Let's just get into it. Like I said, I really enjoy seeing our characters connecting in a more lighthearted atmosphere. Just like last week, I enjoy seeing these characters playing off of each other in these non-stressful situations. I do feel like this will be the last of these kinds of episodes. I think that next week we will be getting into those more serious themes, getting into some action, drama, etc, etc. But what I enjoyed most about this episode, and I feel like the creators just listened in on last week's episode review from me, hearing me comment on the boys suddenly caring about what the girls look like in swimsuits, I found that a bit odd when these characters, these pilots, don't necessarily understand the implications of that. And it's in this episode where they start fleshing that out even more, and they decided to dedicate an entire episode to puberty. I should have guessed that it would go this route, but nevertheless, I am happy that the show feels self-aware enough that it's willing to acknowledge that these characters technically shouldn't be understanding what's going on inside of them, it's just happening. But before we get into that puberty, I'm sorry, I'm skipping over that for now. We need to talk about some of the revelations at the end of this episode. Mysteries and questions posed in regards to the entire overarching story, and I love that they played this entire episode off as just this slice of life lighthearted romp, but in the end we did end up delving into these more serious themes, tonal changes, and straight up mysteries. And for one, I just want to start off on this 02 scene with the rest of the girls where they're trying to get her to their side on this boys-girls war, and 02 just doesn't think that they're taking it seriously enough, and she says, if you keep half-assing things like that, you'll end up like the adults one day. Now there are two ways to take this, and one is more likely than the other, but both of them sprang into my mind when I was thinking about this. One is that 02 has her own feelings about the adults, thinking they're lazy and half-assed because they rely on children to do all of their work. Or two, and this is where the crazy speculation begins, failing or slacking off as a pilot will get you sent to the city where you become an adult. Boom! Now, admittedly, the first one is a lot more likely, especially in the context of this situation. We already know that 02 just has this complete disregard for the adults, for APE. I don't know how she feels about Dr. Franxx, but I would leave that out of the equation. We just know that she generally doesn't care for the adults or APE. So this line fits right in line with that kind of mindset towards that group. But I'm not opposed to the idea of the second being a possibility as well, especially when you hear what 02 has to say after this, where she says, if you have something you want to say, it's better to do it now while you can, because you're all going to die sooner or later. And this probably was the biggest pin drop moment of the episode. Everything just went quiet, it's very dramatic, and you start wondering about the implications of that. Is she just referring to dying on the field, dying in combat fighting the Klaxosaurs, or is she referring to something more, potentially a scheme behind APE who are killing off pilots? And again, we've had this thought for multiple ever since episode 1 we've been thinking this with Naomi. What are they doing to the pilots they send off? However, due to the themes of this episode and what they explore at the very end with Miku, I feel like the first option is a lot more likely here. Not only does it just fit the context a lot better than some secret scheme with APE, but also I just have to consider this. If Hiro's life was on the line in that kind of way, I don't think that 02 Miku would keep it a secret, at least not from Hiro. Maybe she'd keep it a secret from the others, but if her darling's life was on the line in that way where APE is controlling things behind the scenes, I feel like she would tell him. So if there is a plan behind the scenes, I don't think even 02 knows about it. And some people might find that obvious. I just think it's worth pointing out here with some of the things that she says. And like I said, with it fitting the context of this episode, this is even further reinforced at the end. As Miku is hiding in this room from the former Squad 13 pilots, the only reason Miku is willing to make up in the first place is because she realizes that they might end up like the former Squad 13 pilots if they don't learn to work together. But I love this scene even further than that because it's really apparent, it's become apparent that this feeling of mortality and death has never really dawned on our group before. And that feels basically impossible when we've been on the field multiple times at this point. We've had multiple near-death situations. Hell, Squad 26 was getting wrecked in that fight in episode 6. And I think that's one of the reasons why they didn't kill anyone in that fight, because they wanted to use that theme of mortality in this episode and probably even continuing in future episodes just to explore this squad's dynamic with that concept. And I can only imagine the emotional turmoil and drama that will come when one of our squad members eventually dies, and you know it's happening, you know it's coming sooner or later, it's just a matter of when. One final note I'd like to make about this Miku scene, it could just be nothing, but I felt like it was worth at least examining and speculating on, is in the first establishing shot of this room, before we even see Miku, as we're getting the brief overview of what this room looks like, we see a few suitcases lined up on the wall. And if you recall what suitcases are used for in this FranXX program, that is very concerning. Due to nobody really paying attention to them in the scene, I feel like they were really just a background prop, but I can't help but speculate that maybe something more was going on with these pilots than just simply being killed off in action. Why are there suitcases there if they were just killed off randomly? Was the former Squad 13 sent off in the same way that Naomi was, and just completely replaced with new pilots, our Squad 13? Again, I'm not putting too much stock into this theory, but I felt it was worth at least saying. With all of that world building, mystery examining, theory crafting greatness out of the way, let's just go back to the topic of puberty and what I mentioned at the beginning of this review. And this actually is still world building, so let's get into more world building with this very important information from Nana and Hachi, where they say that not only are our characters acting like this because they are going through puberty, they hit puberty, but that they've all hit it around the same time. And as we hear from them, that is actually unprecedented in this FranXX program. At most, we have 1 or 2 in a group hitting it at a time, not our entire squad. And we actually learn that through the APE guidelines that they are supposed to intervene when something like this happens, but the Dr. FranXX tells them not to. And just from this, I wonder what intervening means. What is implied there? What would they do to the people who are going through puberty? Would they separate them or tell them to get closer together? Would we go full Shinsekai Yori and have all the pilots who are hitting puberty get together? I also wonder if them being the test team has anything to do with them all hitting puberty at once, or if this really is all just by chance. From the way that Nana and Hachi talk, this feels like it was just all by chance. And this leads me into some thoughts on Nana and Hachi. Why are they following Dr. FranXX's orders and not APE? Shouldn't APE technically have the higher jurisdiction here? I guess with no direct orders from AP, they're just doing what the doctor says because he's there and he's the one asking them to do those things, versus APE, which just has these guidelines on a computer. But it is still weird to think about. Anyway, zoning back on these talks of puberty, we go through a lot of hilarious hijinks in this episode. It definitely was one of the funniest episodes we've gotten, but I still have to go back to my question that I had last episode, and I was willing to overlook it last week, but now that they're focusing so exclusively on it this week, I just have to question it even further. Why does our group have knowledge about someone being a pervert, or lustful, or horny, but they don't actually understand what love, sex, or relationships are? Where is this knowledge coming from? Are they being taught this by APE? Did they pick up on it from someone else? What is going on here, dude? Could they have only been taught the physical aspect of this and not the psychological, emotional aspect? I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about that, because I feel like they might explore into it later on, but at the same time, if they don't, it feels kind of like having your cake and eating it too. Like, they want those funny situations of the girls calling the boys perverts and the boys ogling the girls because, oh yeah, they're attractive, but they also want to establish this lore and these children as people who shouldn't know about those things. I'm willing to accept that they are feeling something for the other gender just due to the nature of puberty, but I don't feel like they should know about these words like pervert, horny, unless they actually know what it means and what it implies. Again, I hope they go into that more in the future and explain where they learn this stuff and why they know about it the way that they do. Speaking about the boys' feelings about the girls and vice versa, Hiro actually has some intriguing dialogue when he's talking to the boys about making up with the girls, setting things right, talking about how he's never really cared to consider how the girls felt in a given situation. All of the boys agree that they've never really understood the girls, where their mindset is, etc., and the girls feel the same way when we cut to them. That is until 02 came along, and now Hiro feels that desire to get to know his partner more, understand what's going on inside of her head, and wants to protect her. And it was this line that made me realize just how disconnected everyone was from their partners. They had never considered or cared to think about what the other was feeling. It's only with this puberty and the event of 02 joining their group and exposing them to these entirely new concepts where they're starting to want to understand their partners and grow closer and learn more about them. And it just makes you think about how the rest of the pilots in the other plantations are probably feeling just as disconnected and probably will never reach this level of awareness where they feel the need to get to know their partners. And again, I feel like that might be another purpose of this test group. I do want to talk about the very subtle but meaningful 02 characterization that we got at the end of this episode and just throughout in general. I love that she wanted to try taking part in a quote-unquote human fight, and even further with her line saying, "Do I seem a little more human now?" to Hiro after she had run off with the clothes. It's through these lines that we can really see and exemplify what I've been talking about in previous episodes with 02's insecurities about being called a monster from other people. She doesn't want to be seen that way. She wants to be seen as a human, which is what makes it all the more sweet when Hiro is talking to Mitsuru and says, no, 02 is a normal girl. She's not some ultimate pistol. She's one of us. And I very much enjoy the way that they're fleshing out Hiro and 02's relationship through these situations where we just get more and more examples of Hiro accepting 02 for who she is. And in turn, 02 is opening up to Hiro more and more. One little detail that I didn't pick up on that the Discord actually told me about was that 02 is actually wearing a new pilot outfit. It is primarily white now instead of red, and some of them actually think that this possibly symbolizes some kind of rebirth or a change in mindset. Definitely a good pickup, guys, and I can totally see that change in mindset after episode 6. Like I mentioned multiple times, Hiro finally putting his selfish desires to the side and is only concerned with sticking by 02 no matter what. I want to talk about Kokoro in this episode, and it's interesting because she is the only girl on that side of the camp who thinks that dividing their group into boys and girls is not a good idea. And this ties in directly later on when she's talking to the girls about the things that girls can't do without boys. And I enjoy that throughout we get a look into Kokoro's character, how she does toe the line. She doesn't want to go against the popular vote. She doesn't want to argue or disagree with her friends, but she does feel like some things are and aren't okay. Which is why when she's talking to Mitsuru, she respects him so much that he's willing to just abstain from any part in this little feud between the boys and the girls. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty lame thing to respect Mitsuru for. He's just an asshole. He doesn't care about any of these people, but at least we start seeing why Kokoro is starting to connect with Mitsuru more and more. I do have to talk about Mitsuru though. I really did not like him this episode, and a lot of you might be saying, oh, big surprise, Mitsuru's never been likable. I've got to disagree. I kind of enjoyed what they were doing with his character last week in the beach episode, specifically when we saw his interactions with Kokoro, seeing that he actually does care and saved her from being crushed from that building slowly falling apart. But in this episode, it feels like those interactions just never happened because he shows no regard for Kokoro, no interest in what she's talking about whatsoever, and it's kind of annoying, I've got to be honest. I think you can have these asshole douchey characters and still give them moments of likability. Like at the very end when everybody's making up, shaking hands, you see Futoshi just bowing down to Kokoro. You see Mitsuru just look at Ikuno and just walk off, not saying anything, no acknowledgement whatsoever. I think you could have at least had him nod his head to her as the form of, yeah, we're good now. But no, he just walks off, no words, no acknowledgement whatsoever. I really don't like that stuff, and I feel like they were giving Mitsuru more subtle characterization than just, oh, he's an asshole. But in this episode, he was just an asshole. Here's hoping that they develop him in a more meaningful way in the future. Speaking of Mitsuru though, when Kokoro enters the greenhouse and sees Mitsuru there, we can see that he is still taking the painkillers, and I just have to wonder why. Is he still recovering from piloting with 02? Is he addicted to them? Is he suffering from some kind of affliction that we aren't aware of? Maybe there is more between what happened with him and 02, and we'll learn about it later, who knows. Anyways, back on this topic of Kokoro and when she's talking to the girls about things that only they can do with the boys, they can't do it without them. She talks about piloting the FranXX, and then even further, she says that is how it is born, I think. And I like that we're starting to see her form those motherly feelings, and I seriously cannot wait to see where they take her character in general. And just one last little detail that I want to talk about. As the girls are still in the middle of this feud with the boys, you hear Ikuno say she wouldn't mind if it was just the girls together permanently. She does not feel the need to reconnect with the boys, and with a partner like Mitsuru, I don't blame her. But at the same time, we all know what this is alluding to, and 02 just confirms it, because right after Ikuno says this, 02 comes up behind her, licks her, and says, I taste a secret. And I'm just going to say, if you are still denying Ikuno being a lesbian at this point, this episode, you are delusional. The hints, the foreshadowing, it's been here all along, and they just continue building on it, and you know for a fact that they are going to pay that off in some way later on. Whether we get the full Ikuno confession to Ichigo, I don't know. It feels like they're building up to that, but they might take it in a different direction. Now let's talk about some final details, just little notes I didn't know where to structure into this review. For one, Miku being the one narrating at the end of the episode is interesting. This is likely due to the fact that she was the one impacted the most when they found out about the previous Squad 13 and their fates. But still, it is weird that they have been changing the narrator every episode since episode 6, last week with Ichigo and now with Miku, and I wonder if that's alluding to something, or if it's simply because each character has been getting different amounts of focus in each episode, although I still wouldn't consider this episode a Miku focused episode by any means. Honestly, I would consider it a Kokoro or 02 focused one more than anything. On the topic of Miku, I have to talk about her partner Zorome, and I just have to say, I love him. I love him. I cannot believe how much of a 180 I've done on Zorome since episode 1. If you go back and watch those first impressions, Zorome was my least favorite part. I said, wow, who is this douche? Why is he acting so asshole-ish for no reason? And now I love the dude. Every single episode, he's been getting better and better. He's just a little rascal. You can't not like him. I'm not gonna say he's competing on that best boy level, but he's getting close. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie at all. He's getting close to that Goro level of just how much I love the dude. I love the scene at the beginning of this episode, the aftermath of when the girls' clothes were melted off, and Hiro's just trying to say like, wait, 02 said it's better for parasites to be a little pervy. We're all good here, right? And then they just pan over to 02 and she's just nodding in agreement. Little scenes like that, little details, I love that stuff. To focus on the beginning of the episode, I do have to say that while I did enjoy the music at the beginning, it was very different and immediately drew me in and like, oh, what's going on here? It does feel somewhat out of place compared to the OST that we've heard from this series in the past. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it was kind of weird how out of place that music was compared to past episodes. And finally, I just have to say that the new ED is the weakest ED yet, but at the same time, I was expecting to go back to the old ED, the first ED, so I can't really complain that we've had 3 EDs in the span of 8 episodes. That's pretty amazing in its own right. But at this current time, I do have to say that my ranking would be the second ED, then the first ED, then this ED. But that's been all from me for this Darling in the FranXX episode review. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching, commenting, your support, your likes, everything. I love sharing this experience with you guys. Love hearing what you guys think about the episode, your theories, your speculation. It's all really fun to read, and I'm looking forward to next week because I just have this feeling that things will get serious next week. We're starting to enter that final stretch of the first core. They clearly have to set up something very big and climactic for episode 12, and I feel like next episode will be the start of that. And of course, as usual, have a great day.